Welcome to episode 24 of the Motivational Millennial Podcast. Today we are talking with Juliet Kuehnle, who is one of my closest friends from Wake Forest and has become an amazing mental health therapist and all-around wizard of the mind. And so today you are going to get a free therapy session, or at least I did, and you'll get some great wisdom from Juliet around all things related to processing the challenges that we face in life. And speaking of challenges we face in life, I want to encourage you to vote next week if you're in the United States on November 8th, which is a Tuesday. So please take the plunge, do your civic duty, make us all proud.
You get a cool sticker.
That's true. And the knowledge that you may or may not have contributed to changing the course of the future, depending on if you live in a swing state or not. But you should all vote anyway. All right.
Oh my gosh. Worst PSA ever.
Well, there are a lot of new swing states this year. So just to be on the safe side, go ahead and vote.
Just vote.
And encourage your friends to vote. Because you know what? It'll give you an excuse to complain for the next 4 years. So without further ado.
Motivational.
Well, it's very millennial, if not motivational. So, Juliet, we're sorry. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, stick around also for the after show. After we talk with Juliet, this is our most disastrous intro ever, but I'm just going to leave it because it's amazing. Stick around for the after show where Ivy and I will discuss our biggest takeaways from the wisdom that is Juliet Kuehnle. Woo-hoo. All right, let's do this thing. Hello, welcome to the Motivational Millennial Podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Blake Brandis.
And I'm Ivy LeClaire.
Our motivational millennial guest today is Juliet Lam Kuehnle. Juliet is a mental health therapist with her own private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her areas of expertise include eating disorders, body image, self-esteem, grief and loss, identity issues, and life transitions. Juliet contributes to the pop culture and psychology blog Shrink Tank, is co-authoring a parenting book, and appears monthly on the Charlotte Today Show. Juliet, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy life and schedule.
I'm excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. So we'd love to hear more about what you're up to at the moment and why you're so passionate about it.
So what I'm up to, I am a working mom. So that kind of encompasses it. I am working 3 days a week, have my private practice, and then I have off long weekends with my girls. So I have a 2 and an almost 4-year-old. And so I'm off with them on Mondays, Fridays, and then I'm here at work on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and pretty long days, but I like it that way just to kind of have that balance. Yeah, so I'm also, besides seeing clients, giving presentations around town, contributing just at, various schools or churches or other groups in the community. And as you mentioned, appearing on the local Today Show on different mental health topics. We also have webinars that we do here. While I have a private practice, I'm within a bigger group. So we're all independent contractors here, but it's really nice because, you walk outside of your office and there's 30 other colleagues, and we have a whole media marketing arm that does podcasts and webinars, and we have a publishing company for books. So just a really creative, innovative environment. And why I'm so passionate about it, it is so fulfilling and humbling to have someone lay out their story with you and to just be completely vulnerable, to allow me to walk through that story with them. So it's heavy, but it's pretty much as raw and as honest as it gets to, be able to empower people and help them tap into their strengths that they already have, to learn skills. And it's just amazing. And there's never a dull moment. I mean, you never know what's going to walk through the door, right? So it's just constantly changing, and I have to be on top of my game, on top of the latest research and theories and techniques and all of that. So it's really personally challenging, professionally fulfilling. I love what I do.
That's great. I'm interested in the perspective you mentioned, helping people bring out or recognize the strengths that they already have. And I know that's something that Ivy's talked a lot about through her coactive coaching. I'm curious, was that a perspective that you kind of started out with when you got into mental health, or is that something that developed over time?
Well, I do always, tend to believe, right, that there's good in people and that we all have, ingrained strengths and characteristics that we can pull on in times of despair or where we're struggling a bit. So there is what's called, a strength-based approach, which is kind of a whole technique within the therapy and counseling world where you're very intentionally working with someone to identify what their strengths are, where in the places where they more easily are able to tap into those, what sort of a barrier and why they're not able to translate those to other areas of their lives. And so when you can have somebody realize that that's already within them, then they have a little more buy-in in the process. They're a lot, more hopeful along the way as well. So that's definitely something that, I came into it with that idea of just knowing that, no one is as helpless as they might feel and present when they first come into a session. It's developed along the way too, as I've gotten more experience.
How do you think that this perspective affects you navigating your family and what it's like to be a working mom and all of that balance that you were talking about earlier?
Right. It is definitely a balance. I would say, one of the biggest challenges when I first entered this profession and that I still have to navigate from time to time is how to not carry some of the heaviness home. And as you're saying, sort of this perspective of strengths-based, that is how I try to just present in my life too, and how I try to parent, right? That it's positive reinforcement in that way. It's giving myself a break when things do feel really tedious and hard, and recognizing, okay, my strengths in that process too. I've done this before. This is what has helped me pull out of this before, whatever it might be, but that I will be okay. That my kiddos also respond a lot better coming from that perspective too than a nagging or punishment, right? Especially at their developmental stages right now, they do thrive off of that praise and that positive reinforcement. So that is all related for sure.
And something you talked about earlier about the story that people are telling themselves. Could you dive into that a little bit more? Because I know from my own motivational speaking work that the story young people especially tell themselves about who they are and what they're capable of makes such a difference in the choices they make, which really impact their lives. So I'm curious, as you've been working, I know you work with young people a lot too, have you seen that story play a large role? And if so, how do you help them craft a new, more empowering story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I love that concept, particularly as people like Brene Brown lay it out, this story, the first draft that we might tell ourselves, and how do you continue to rewrite that? I love that. And with kids, it is kind of harder to, they don't necessarily have the insight into what that means and in the way that an adult might be able to conceptualize that. It is so rewarding to be able to have a kid come in here who wants to come in here, who now, all of a sudden they have this space that's their own, that's somebody outside of their parents that they can talk to about anything and everything. And to be able to tease apart with them either messages that they have heard from mom or dad, whether explicit or implicit, messages that they receive from peers or society, teasing all that apart and using kind of different techniques to help them understand how that is impacting their self-image or their self-esteem, or the way that they operate in interacting with others. And so, sometimes I'll use art therapy depending on kind of the age with kids, and we will even draw out that story. We did a storybook yesterday, actually. So that's just good timing. A girl and her anxiety, but she sort of drew it in the sense of it was anxiety and the cat was the name of the story. And that was an easier way for her to kind of navigate, okay, this is how anxiety was taking over my life. And it was this creature above the cat in the first several pictures. And then, it moves to this image of the cat stepping on anxiety, and that she will no longer let it, control her life. And that's this amazing thing about therapy and counseling is you can meet people where they are, use different tactics and techniques to do that and to help them understand what that story is they've been telling to themselves and how things could be different if they just reframe and recognize what that self-talk has been. So, and obviously a lot of that is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy.
I can actually hear your tone of voice get higher and more excited, and like your pace sort of quicken as you're talking about the possibilities that are available to people when they change the story. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because I could just hear you getting like more excited about it.
You're right, because it is so powerful. I mean, it's so powerful. And we all have that capability. It's just, whether you're ready and willing and able to kind of go there and let yourself be moved by that, by that change. And it's rewarding for sure on my side of things to be witness to that.
And this might be a question that's perhaps out of the scope, or we don't even have nearly enough time, but I'm curious, what in your experience are some of the biggest things that hold people back from making that change? Because I know in my own life, there are certain things where I just get so frustrated. Like I see the pattern of, like procrastination or whatever. And like,
is this a therapy session?
Yeah,
right
I was
now?
thinking
so can we just take like 15 minutes to really work into my deep psyche issues? No.
I'll send you a check.
Yeah, but I'm just curious what you've seen is what are some of the biggest things that even when people can identify what the problem is, like what stops them from changing?
Fear. Absolutely.
No hesitation there. You're just like fear, it's it.
Absolutely. And on different levels. I mean, it's scary to change. We get really complacent. Even if it's uncomfortable, we can get really comfortable in that familiarity. And so fear is got to be the number one reason why it's hard to decide to be vulnerable. It's hard to decide to have somebody walk through it with you to increase your insight into those patterns. It's scary, even if it ends up being good on the other side. It's one of those things that's oftentimes, it's hard, really hard before it gets better.
And that's such a biological phenomenon too. I mean, the fear is really the lizard brain, right? Mm-hmm. So that makes it, even if we can intellectually know that having a conversation is not going to kill me, our brain equates that with saber-toothed tiger jumping down from the ledge.
Fly, exactly. Yeah. You're right.
So we'd love to hear a story of a defining moment that helped you discover this passion you have.
It's not, some great, wonderful story other than I sat on the other side of the couch, if you will, as a child. So I really struggled with existential thinking and grappling with the concept of mortality when I was young. And so I went to a therapist and learned ways to cope with that and a lot of anxiety reduction skills, and it was really helpful. But also with that existential thinking, really, I've always been one that has wanted to or needed to seize the day and make the most out of our short time here on earth and kind of have felt always this desperation to do so. That's sort of how my anxiety manifests. So I have always known that because counseling and therapy and true connection with others, because that's one of my core values, if not my biggest core value, I always knew that this is what I wanted to do. I landed in my first long internship, just kind of coincidentally, at an eating disorder treatment facility and had no prior experience with it. And it was just exactly where I was meant to be. I ended up staying there for my first job, and I was there for almost 5 years. And I will never forget the first time that I was part of a client's journey from when she first entered treatment and had no insight and awareness of her eating disorder, and working with her all the way into recovery. And that is a long, tedious, strenuous process. But she will forever be part of my journey in this. And she was also a part of one of my first group therapy experiences that was really powerful. One of the first times that I realized that, I can be creative in therapy and counseling. When you're first coming out of grad school, you're just, you're so nervous, you're following sort of all the techniques by the book. And I remember just thinking about Bruce Springsteen's song, Philadelphia. Those lyrics resonated with a lot of the stories of these girls that I had been working with for a while. So I decided to play that song in one of our group therapy sessions. And what happened in that room was it was so palpable that day that was also one of the moments where I knew that working with girls and women in particular as one of my specialty areas was what I meant to do. And that is extremely fulfilling and rewarding for me. So there's just kind of all these little moments of like, boom, this is right. This is it that have happened along the way and that continue to happen that solidify this being exactly what I'm meant to be doing.
I love that story because it's like you were really coming into your own in that moment.
Yeah, which is scary, right? I mean, because you're in it with somebody in their heaviest, darkest, most vulnerable stuff, and you don't want to make any missteps, especially in the beginning, you feel all this pressure to not do that. And then at some point you kind of realize, A, you got to trust yourself, and B, if you're in it with them, that speaks volumes, first of all. And then you can kind of, once you've, let down that was my guard, really. So like you're saying, once I let that down, I was able to, I don't know, it was really powerful.
How do you maintain that balance of being open and able to be there with people and receive whatever emotions they're experiencing, and still do that many times per day, and then B, kind of release it at the end of the day, or not internalize all of it? How do you deal with that?
Exactly. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenges to this. It is very heavy. Other than being genuinely interested in every person that comes in here, right? So I feel, when one person leaves and I go to get the next person, I genuinely feel interested in how their week has gone, what they've practiced, what they've been able to do to cope. You never know what's going to come through the door. So you can't, as a therapist, have necessarily an agenda set of how action's going to go. I mean, these are humans we're talking about. So you never know. So I think it's just stimulating in that way too, that it's not draining in that sense as you're going from appointment to appointment throughout the day. Now, at the end of the day, that's another story. It's sort of like at some point, sometimes I do just kind of sit down like, whoa, what just happened? What just hit me? And that's why I do have kind of a routine I do every night to sort of decompress. I'm really big on self-care. I'm really big on consulting with other colleagues, which is why I love being here. If there are times in the middle of the day that I do need to run into someone's office and, scream or whatever, I can do that. So I'm not isolated in it either. It is heavy stuff. And it's something that I have had to learn to do. And sometimes it will kind of come out of nowhere and I'll realize, okay, why am I feeling a little tense right now? And then I'll realize that it's somebody's story that is kind of sitting with me. But then I just use that to figure out where are we going to go next.
I really enjoy and appreciate that you're sharing this perspective right now, because as someone who has gone to therapy, it's like it's all about you. Like, obviously as the patient, it's all about you. And so I'm really appreciating you just like describing. It's like helping me think about my therapist in a different way. And I imagine that other people who will be listening will be like, oh, so that's what that experience is like for them. Because, when you're working through your own stuff, like that's what you're thinking about, which is fair. And that's why you're there. But I really appreciate that you're being so authentic and sharing this experience. It's like giving me new insight and compassion.
That's cool. Well, and you want to know, I would hope that you would feel, that your therapist is genuinely engaged, right? I mean, so we know with 80% of success in counseling is about the therapeutic relationship. So if you're not feeling connected, heard, understood, if you don't have that rapport with the therapist, you're not going to get anywhere.
Juliet, since you've begun pursuing mental health as a passion and a profession, what is the biggest challenge you've faced and how have you overcome it?
Well, we touched on what I would have identified as the first one. So learning to not carry it all home and be sort of burdened by it in my personal life. But I would say professionally too, the other biggest challenge was deciding to take the leap into private practice, because I had been at the treatment center agency for 5 years. And there was just a lot of predictability to that, a lot of, quote, safety in that, in the sense that we had a lot of rules to follow. And so that part was just, you knew exactly what you were supposed to do, what paperwork was due, you knew what your paycheck was going to look like that sort of thing. So deciding to take the leap to private practice was a huge, huge risk. And it's funny because when you hear my husband talk about that decision, his experience of that was different than mine. I think in my heart of hearts, I always knew I would eventually do it. Just sort of, well, when was that? When is the right time? He was really the one who was like, let's do this. You're ready. We will figure it out financially, because it is a risk on that level. With finances, it's a risk mentally, because you have to jump right in and market yourself and just put a lot of effort in. And again, if you're on your own, there's, you got to make sure you're doing everything the right way. There isn't as much sort of hand holding as there is in an agency. And so it just kind of happened, and the timing felt right enough that I trusted him too, that if he felt we could do this, that it was the right time. So we took the leap. It was about a year and a half ago that I ventured out. So it has definitely been the right decision.
And what has that transition been like, going from sort of an employee mindset, if that's fair, to business owner, entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, so it is different. I mean, I have had to, going back to that strengths base, right, pull on some of my abilities to be comfortable, kind of putting myself out there in terms of going to doctors' offices, going to schools, introducing myself, creating marketing materials, creating talks and presentations and pitching those ideas. Or if someone reaches out to our organization and asks for a talk on a certain topic, deciding to take that on and take that risk. And again, to the responsibility of keeping up with things, having to have intrinsic motivation to do that, I guess. And that's what's great about where I work right now. I feel constantly challenged by, the people around me that are doing these awesome, innovative, creative things to do that also. And so if I was just in an office, on a corner by myself, I think that would feel different too. But I just need colleagues. I need people around me. I need some of that stimulation in that way. And that's definitely, it's made me up my game for sure. It's been awesome.
So what advice would you like to give to other millennials who are also on this path toward fulfillment and success?
Oh, one of my favorite pieces of quote advice or whatever that I often give to clients, that I remind myself, is to trust the process. There's not always going to be, these Oprah aha moments, whether it's in, in a therapy session or as you're trying to, take some kind of risk. There may not be these big moments that provide clarity or, make it suddenly all make sense. You have to just trust that it's all part of building the foundation and that it's all propelling you forward, and that, the hope is that one day it will make sense, right? But that you just have to trust that process, that it's building blocks along the way. Failure is part of success. So we have to take risks. And, I don't even like that word failure, right? But if that happens along the way, you also have to trust that as part of the process.
That ties in with a larger concept, too, of investing in yourself that I think about a lot, because part of trusting the process, whether it's a therapeutic process or any kind of personal development journey, really relates to this idea that investing in yourself and taking the time to work on your inner life, your inner mind, your inner motivation, whatever it is so important, and often gets framed as some kind of selfish, narcissistic act. And I definitely admit to having felt that way for a while. Sure. Well, why would I take the time to talk to a therapist? Like, I need to be out making things happen,
Right. I should be okay. Everything's going fine. I should be, all the shoulds that we do.
That's exactly right. I have a position of privilege, oh my gosh, there's so many people who have it so much worse than I do. Who am I to go to blah, blah. So those things definitely come up. But I have to say, from having done increasingly more of the personal development work, it makes such an exponential difference in the terms of impact you can have on the world. And so I definitely want to encourage our listeners that if you've been thinking about doing something or taking some step to make some positive change in your life, to really go for it, because it may, like you said, it may be a process. It may take some time. It might not immediately everything changed for the better, but it's like anything, if you're trying to have a healthier body for yourself, that's a process, and you're going to see it over time.
A good place to start with that when you're, talking about investing in yourself is doing some sort of values clarification or a values inventory, because we never really stop to intentionally think about what our values are. And there are tons of them, but there are also, you can even just Google it and reference some of these sheets. But if you take the time to look at what those might be, to think about how those were influenced, then you can figure out, tweaks that you can make in your life to align with those values. So maybe you're actually valuing something that really it's a societal value. It's not really yours. So maybe it's something that you want to actually reject, and that you'd rather do things differently to increase something that is truly valuable for you, not a value imposed on you from your parents, for example. But it's just a good place to start when you're thinking about, how do I invest in myself and make sure that I'm living a purposeful life?
It's true. When I work with clients and do the, values clarification like you're talking about, it gives this amazing lens to allow yourself and them, so yourself being the listeners now,
right.
not me as the coach, but as the client or whoever's doing that clarification to see, okay, what really are my values? And sometimes we may have values that we feel kind of guilty about having or feel weird about having because they might be against society. And so then there's this dissonance that comes up because you have a value that you honor but also feel weird about. And so it gives you the opportunity to learn how to honor that and really love that part about yourself. So it's like a different lens and way for you to engage in that self-love as well.
Yep. Totally agree.
I would love to hear about a time that you trusted the process and how that worked out for you.
This is going to sound so cheesy, but I feel like that happens kind of on a daily basis, that we have the choice when we enter each day to make decisions that, again, that are aligned with our values. You know, I'm actually kind of on this different sort of spiritual faith journey right now, in which I'm meeting with a spiritual advisor and kind of reading these new devotions and doing holy yoga, like all the stuff that is totally new to me. But, you know, so when you first asked that, I'm like, well, that's the first thing that came to mind because it feels really foreign, a lot different than the religion that I grew up with. But I've listened to whatever it is pushing me through this and towards that. And so I think every day I'm intentionally making a choice to honor that and to explore that. And I'm not scared by it at all. So I'm definitely just trusting in that and curious about it and kind of excited to see what happens with it.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's difficult sometimes when you're kind of in the middle of that process to be able to talk about it. But I think something you said really is important, which is you listen to yourself. And I know for me, often there's this idea of not listening to myself is the way to achieve things. It's if I just don't listen to whatever my inner compass is saying, then I can actually focus on the work that needs to be done.
But you can step out of your own way.
Exactly. But yeah, I think listening to yourself sometimes helps direct you and see maybe the work that needs to really be done is not actually the work you should be doing.
Yeah. Well, right. It depends on what that draft is, you know, like what is that self-talk at the time? Like sometimes it is not productive, but if you can recognize that and shut it down, that's not always a bad thing.
Moving into our final segment about what gets you motivated, do you have some kind of morning routine on an ideal day that gets you motivated and set up to conquer the day?
So on the 3 days that I work, my husband takes the girls to school. So, for example, this morning was pretty ideal. I went for a few mile run and then ran to Trader Joe's, got some groceries and came back. So physical activity and grocery shopping alone is a wonderful start to the day. The days that I have the girls or on the weekends, I'm awakened by a 3-year-old who's just really excited to show me the outfit she picked out for the day. And I invite her into bed with me and we snuggle. And that's also an amazing way to start those days. But again, my time of encouragement or motivation or self-care or whatever you want to call it is I set that aside for nighttime just because that's much more predictable and consistent for me. So every night is when I'm either looking at those devotionals or setting aside a timer for 10 minutes to do some sort of meditation, deep breathing, something like that. And that's my time just to get centered.
I like how you've set up that routine, but also kind of your weekly schedule to really align with what sounds like are your values around family and also being there for your patients. Right.
Yeah. We wouldn't trade it for the world. We have a really good balance going right now.
Would you share a motivational quote or a book that has changed your life in some way?
So at Wake Forest, Dr. Maya Angelou was my professor one semester. And pretty much anything and everything she said could fit within this question. But I remember on day one, she shared a quote from the famous playwright Terence, and it translates to, "I'm a human being, therefore nothing that is human can be alien to me." And that has always, always stuck with me. And not just because of her booming yet gentle voice, but the message in that it was, this man who was once enslaved that was able to transcend his anger in this quote implying forgiveness, but also the concept of linking the common ground between all people. And so I remember pulling on that quote a lot in my early years of training too. For example, if I had a client that was a divorced male, right? Like I am not those things, yet I know what it feels like to be ashamed. I know what it feels like to fight for something. Like there is always something that can link us all. So I am a human being. Therefore, nothing that is human can be alien to me. I love that.
There are a couple things. One is that's so cool that you got to be in her presence. And
it was amazing.
I mean, I'm like, let's just stop for a second and be like, that's really cool.
I pretty much try to name drop that whenever I can. So.
What a great experience. Not just to be reading her words or, but to be experiencing her words. So it makes so much sense that it was something that she said in that experience that really stuck with you and resonated with you over the years.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
I loved it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a great talk. Will you share with the audience how they can find out more about you and your work?
Sure. So southeastpsych.com. That's where I have my private practice. So it's southeastpsych.com. Just a really cool website to go and peruse to. And you can link from there to our psychology and pop culture blog called shrinktank.com. The tagline is, if psychology and pop culture had a baby, it would be shrinktank.com. So that's just a really cool site. They'll notify everyone on there too when our parenting book comes out and other books that we have in the works, and just lots going on over here. So that's the best website.
Awesome. And also, if anyone wants to Google Charlotte Today and your name, I'm a big advocate of all of your amazing Charlotte Today appearances. They have Juliet on there regularly to talk about different mental health issues every month, and it's always interesting and fantastic and sometimes hilarious. So
yeah, you never know what questions are going to come at you, and you just have 4 minutes to convey your message very succinctly, and it's a fun time. Yep.
That's great. Well, Juliet, thanks again for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is supported by Motivational Millennial Consulting Services. We work with organizations and teams to develop millennial leaders by understanding and tapping into millennial skills and values. In short, we strive to enrich organizations one millennial at a time. To learn more about our customized offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com/consulting. Welcome to the after show of our conversation with Juliet Kuehnle. One of the things we didn't talk with Juliet about is her singing career.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she's been on a few of my albums. But we'll save that for another day. There's so much good stuff in there, including a free therapy session. So I appreciate that, Juliet. Thanks a lot. Let me sort through my issues. One of the things I really liked that Juliet said with confidence and certainty was the thing that prevents us from changing is fear. And
you have like the fist. You're doing the fist right now.
I am.
It's fear.
I have the fist of confidence. So I've been thinking about it a lot since we talked with her, as we're recording this a little bit later than our conversation. And I think fear is the biggest thing that stops me from doing anything truly meaningful. And the way I can tell is because when I have maxed out my capacity for real, my brain isn't thinking, my body has just hit the wall. Like I've been in meetings from 9 a.m. until 11 p.m. and I just am going to fall asleep. That's done. And that's what I know. I could push probably a little bit more, but that's pretty much my actual capacity. But then there's my fake capacity, and that's the fear voice. That's the voice that says, you really want to be working on this new speech right now, but instead you should take a break. It's all this fake rationalization. And I know it's fake because the thing I really want to be doing is working on the speech. But the thing my brain says is, no, working on the speech is hard. You need a break right now. And that's just fear. It's fear posing as self-compassion or whatever it is.
Well, I think it's so interesting that you frame it in that way of fake capacity. That's so funny because I think we can tell ourselves this story that our capacity is a lot less and a lot smaller than we really think it is. You could take that realization and just feel more upset with yourself or bad or something like, oh gosh, like it's all me. But really, for me, when I had that realization at some point, when I started thinking that when I treat myself like my capacity is less than it is, I'm not supporting myself. I'm not loving myself. Like I say that I'm being compassionate with myself by being like, oh, you're just like really, like you said, you just really need to take a break. Or like in the morning, if you really want to wake up and you've been looking forward to waking up the next day and doing yoga or going for a walk or whatever, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, you really should just sleep a little bit better, and it takes practice and discernment to know the difference there. But I don't know, I think what's really happening is you're not necessarily having the faith in yourself that is possible. So it's like increasing your capacity isn't, for me, about like being harder on myself. So like I don't have that fake self-compassion, but it's actually about believing in myself and going, you know what, you can actually do this. You can totally, it's going to be okay. You can do this.
That's it. It's about stepping into your power, as cliche as that may sound, but that's really what I have to say to myself in those moments. It's, you're more powerful than this. Mm-hmm. It's not that you're weak or bad or whatever. It's actually that you're better. Mm-hmm. And not in a like scolding, you're better than this.
Right.
But no, actually, you are great and powerful and you can do the things that you really want to do in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it can take a lot of bravery to take the responsibility that you have for your own capacity and turn it into empowerment rather than turning it into a shame game and a way of sort of beating yourself up even more. And so I love that you're talking about taking that actually I can do better and not turning it into, oh my gosh, I can do better. Like, why am I not doing better? But turning it into, oh my gosh, like I have so much power within me and I have so much capacity and so much growth, and allowing yourself to be in that place, even though there's very likely the small voice behind you going, why didn't you think of this earlier? And how come you didn't step into your power until now? Like, it's so amazing how that can be there, but really allowing yourself to listen to that voice of empowerment and feel it.
What stuck out for you from our conversation with Juliet?
Well, it's crazy because it's actually really directly related to what you pulled out about fear being the main thing that keeps people from changing. She said that when she is working with her clients, that she believes that she holds for them that they are stronger than they may be feeling at the current moment. Mm-hmm. And I love that. It's really inspiring for me because I've begun this path of becoming a coactive coach. And the coactive model has all of these elements to it. But one of the cornerstones is that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And I've heard it so many times that I have that down. Like I just have that sentence down. And it's really this premise. It's the belief that people are incredibly resilient and incredibly resourceful. And even in those moments when they feel the lowest or the most afraid, that they are actually a lot stronger than they think they are. So it's twofold in that, one, I as a coach have to trust that I am naturally creative, resourceful, and whole too, so that in that role, I'm just being present with whoever I'm speaking with and holding that space for them. But also, I'm very good at encouraging, I'm very good at cheerleading, but sometimes we have patterns or ways that we're getting in our own way, and having a coach and a safe place to be is like a really great time to hear that, because I as a coach can see that from the outside perspective. And I realize that by not doing that, by not saying, is this really where you want to be, or how long do you want to be in this place, or not being willing to take them to the hard places or hold them in those hard places, it's like I'm treating people like they're not strong. It's like I'm treating people, and it's not conscious, but that's what I'm doing when I'm being overly fluffy or whatever with the people in my life, because being very warm is like just my natural orientation. And, you know, when I'm able to say, you know, help people through that, and every single person that I work with says to me, I want you to be honest with me. I want you to point those things out to me. That's why they're there. People want to grow, and they know sometimes there's stuff like that they're getting in their own way, and they want that to be pointed out. And I just love that in those moments when people are saying that to me, they on some level know that they are strong. They know that they are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. They know that they have that capacity within them, and they want someone to hold them in that. And so I loved hearing that from Juliet's perspective. And, you know, she has many more years of experience in working with people. It's very different medium, but it's similar in some ways. And so it was just great. She was secretly cheerleading me and didn't even know it.
Well, it's true. People are resilient. And I think what you do is provide them with feedback in a context that's not so loaded like it would be if they just asked their friends or, you know, their family or somebody.
Boss or something,
yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like the word.
It's got a lot more charge around it. So I think that's really helpful. And also something I think that you, Ivy, encouraged us to do recently was to go on a ziplining ropes course. And that was really great. And it made me think about this in relation to this conversation, because I think electing to put yourself in challenging situations sometimes can show you what you can overcome and prove to yourself that you're stronger than you think. So many of the challenges we experience in our daily lives are not necessarily of our choosing or within our control. You know, can't control the weather, can't control the economy. There are a lot of things outside of our control. But when we choose a challenge and then overcome it, I think it gives really that sense of power and strength, because you have something that you can refer back to. And it doesn't have to be an elective challenge that you look at that. There are plenty of things that we've overcome in our lives that were hard that we can look at. But I think sometimes the fact that you actively chose to do this is powerful, because you're not just bunkering down and weathering the storm of life as it throws wave after wave after wave on top of you. And you're just like, okay, I'm resilient. Like, I can beat back this wave and beat back this wave. And it may feel like that sometimes. But I think if you can stand up metaphorically, so rather than crouch down, I'm doing a visual on a podcast.
I know, I can see it. He's got his arms there. There's some, yeah.
That's right. It's the most challenging thing to do. But, you know, sort of crouching down with my arms up, like blocking, versus when you stand up and you are able to stride forward with confidence. That's coming from a whole different place of energy. And I think the possibilities that you create when you're in that mode are amazing, because if things come at you there, you just brush them off. You don't even have to fight them. You know, it's like, oh, brush that aside, because I'm walking somewhere. I think when we're crouched down, we're just trying to protect the little piece of ground we're on and just try to stay whole. And that can feel really necessary, depending on what's going on. But the difference between just trying to hold up your shield versus walking confidently in the direction of your dreams is night and day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's really about how you're viewing yourself and how you're viewing what you're capable of. Because the truth is that even if you're walking confidently in the direction of your dreams, like, things are going to happen that suck. Things are going to happen that aren't just, you're going to just brush off. Like, in reality, like, things are going to happen and you're going to be like, wow, this is not exactly what I expected, or this is really disappointing and this is really painful. But the difference being that you know that you're capable of continuing walking and moving forward, even when those things happen. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that they're not necessarily going to be painful or hard, but it just means that you know and believe in your capacity to continue. And that in and of itself is a whole new level of living a fulfilling life, really. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not meeting the exact external expectations that you may have built up in your mind, the act of moving forward and the act of putting yourself out there is in and of itself can be quite fulfilling and amazing.
Well, that's a goal I think we can advocate.
Totally advocate it here. We are
on
big
the
advocates.
Motivational Millennial Podcast. Oh, so good. Well, we appreciate you all being with us here today for this great conversation with Juliet and the after show, and we hope you tune in next week. Thanks so much. For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Blake Brandis. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!